Grow, Sell, and Retire is the podcast for the lazy overachiever. B.D. Dalton, author of True Gravity and Grow, Sell, and Retire, is here to give you his 25 years of secrets, tips, and systems to take your business to the next level. This is your chance to find out what is working in sales, marketing, and running your business. If you stop learning, you stop burning. Now, here's your host, BD, with today's GSR podcast.
Hey, Grow, Sell, and Retire listeners. This is BD Dalton here, bringing you my interview with Campbell Macpherson. He's an amazing author, written the book called The Change Catalyst. You'll know, if you know anything about me, that Grow, Sell, and Retire and Bart Dalton Consultancy, we call our people that deliver our products catalysts. And this man is amazing. He won the book awards this year down in London. I was there watching him. He was sharing this with his family as he walked up on stage, but he looks at business. He looks at people. He's done all sorts of things. He's flown planes. He's been all over the world. He's done lots of stuff for business. So this is going to be a great chance for you to look at how you need to be focused on making sure that you are making changes to yourself, to your life, to your business, so that you can become that amazing, lazy overachiever that we're all working for here on Grow, Sell, and Retire podcast. So here he is, Mr. Campbell Macpherson, and my interview with him as the Change Catalyst. Well, Campbell, welcome to the Grow, Sell, and Retire podcast. Thank you for coming on the show.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on it.
No problem. So in the intro, I talked about the Change Catalyst. What brought you to write the Change Catalyst?
Well, the short answer is a very long Ramadan and then a very long summer in Abu Dhabi about 2 years ago. But that's the trite answer. The full answer is that early in 2016, I saw a survey from Bain & Co. that said that 88% of change initiatives fail. And I thought, oh, that's the hook for a great book. And so then I gave a presentation when I was in Abu Dhabi working with one of the largest sovereign wealth funds there. I gave a presentation on why change fails. And I went through the top 10 reasons that I've seen over the last 25 years of why change fails. And then after that, I thought, goodness me, that really is the hook for a book, and then started writing.
That's awesome. So Abu Dhabi, working for sovereign wealth fund. So kind of walk us through a really quick potted history of your work.
Right. Well, I've been helping CEOs and leadership teams clarify their strategy and then align their people to deliver their strategy for about the last 25 years, and that always encompasses some sort of culture change. So it's always building a culture that is change ready and is able to deliver change, and then helping the leaders to lead successful and sustainable change. So, well, I did a 3-year stint in Abu Dhabi, and it was fabulous. And then at the end of that, I was resuming my consultancy. And a year before that, I thought, well, when I resume my consultancy, what I really need is a book. And so I went through that process I talked about earlier, wrote the book, and then for some delightful reason, Wiley decided to publish it. So it was just fabulous.
Cool. And how did you, for people that are aspiring to be authors, how did you come across, or how did you build your relationship with Wiley or your publisher, or how did you come across wanting to write to that level? Because publishers are too demanding.
That's a great question. So there's a real reason and a right reason for everything, and there's a real answer and a right answer. I'll give you the right answer, which is I logged onto their website, and they have a fantastic template of what they would like to see in a proposal and the order in which you need to fill it in and everything you'd like to see. So I went through that painstakingly and did about 10 different versions of that before I sent it off. That version, I'm pretty sure they ignored. The version that they looked at was the one that came from my speakers agency that said, oi, this kid's got a book, and actually, kid, who am I talking about? I'm 55 next week. This man's got a book. You should have a look at it. He's part of our stable. Now, ironically, because I moved to Abu Dhabi and was not allowed to do any public speeches, the speakers agency had signed me up and then had not engaged me at the time. So I hadn't done one speech for them, but they still sent the book proposal off to Wiley, and that got me in the door. Because Wiley said that they only look at 5% of the proposals they receive. I thought, goodness me, and then they only publish 5% of those. So at least I got through the first hurdle.
That's great. So I didn't know that. So you couldn't speak in Abu Dhabi, or you couldn't be a
No, because I was working for fundamentally a government department. It was a case of we prefer if you didn't do any public speaking. So
just in case you give away any secrets.
Yeah, precisely.
That's good. No, it's perfect. It makes the most sense. So you talk about this, the whole thing about change and culture and people looking at trying to build sustainable change and culture getting in the way. Why are people so adverse to change or, don't like it?
Well, that's a really good question. In fact, it's the first chapter. It's the number one reason why 88% of changes fail, and it's fundamentally people don't like change. The easiest answer to that is fear, but fear comes in 4 different shapes and sizes. And I think the most important one is fear of failure. People are just too afraid to stick their neck out because what happens if I fail? And in fact, often they're not afraid of the failure, perhaps. They're afraid of the consequences of the failure. So if they're working in a big organization and they fail, they're worried what will happen to their career. If they're working in a small company and they fail, they worry what will happen to their business. And I was giving a talk on this just yesterday, and we were discussing that actually the cousin to that is the fear of success. Weirdly enough, is that people are also afraid of succeeding. Because if they succeed, they get promoted, they go to a next level of status and importance. And then what if they fail then? So actually, fear of success is really just a delayed fear of failure. There's a wonderful, cynical piece of work that was done about 50, 60 years ago by a Dr. Peter. It's called the Peter Plateau. That he said that everybody in business ends up getting promoted to their position of incompetence.
The Peter Principle. That's awesome. That is.
Which I just love that. Which I absolutely love.
That is.
Fear of failure is really big.
Keep promoting them until you don't know what they do anymore and you can't ask them enough.
Yeah, precisely. No, that's and actually it's cynical, but you stand back and you go, there's something in that. But another one is fear of the unknown. People, we're all afraid of the unknown. We all get a bit tribal. It's part of our human fight or flight instinct, and we have to help our people overcome, or we have to help ourselves overcome the fear of the unknown by making it familiar. Before the change, learning as much about the changes as possible. And a couple of the others are fear of blame. So if you're in charge of something right now and someone's coming in to tell you that you actually need to change the way you're doing it, you're afraid of that you could be blamed for currently doing things in a suboptimal way. So you end up becoming part of the problem. But the big one really, I think, is fear of the future. Literally fear of the future. There was a Harvard business school professor, Roosevelt Cantor, who said that people would rather stay mired in misery than leap into the unknown of the future, which I think sums it up. It's just, we're just hardwired to resist change. So that's what we have to do as leaders. We have to help people overcome their fears of change, because the only way we can be successful as leaders of change, and frankly, if you're not leading change, you're not leading anything, the only way we can become successful is through our people, because only our people can actually deliver the change that our business requires.
So if somebody's getting ready to implement a change initiative or even minuscule, what one question should they ask themselves to make sure that they're prepared for it?
Well, it's to go through the fears. It's to say, what is holding me back? What are my concerns about what is going to happen? So one of the things to think through is, what are the implications of this? As I say to a lot of my clients, and you're right, big companies and small companies, these could be one-man bands, these can be individuals that are simply talk about, well, what could possibly go wrong, and think through the negative and positive, but the negative implications of the change. So to make it familiar, to think through make the unintended consequences a little bit more familiar, a little bit intended, if you like. What could possibly go wrong is a great question to ask, and then start to realize what it is that you might be afraid of. Are you afraid that you'll be blamed for how things currently are? Are you afraid that whatever could go wrong in the future? Are you afraid of what you're giving up? And identify what it is you'll be giving up with this change, and is it worth the leap? So it's really to confront your own fears, to be perfectly honest.
That's really good. So I was having a chat with Shane Snow, who just wrote a book called Dream Teams that actually came out today. But he was talking about one thing in this PC world that we live in, where people don't like conflict, at least not face to face.
Good point.
He has the theory that people are supposed to have an actual planted devil's advocate in every team. And planted as in instead of having somebody who's always the negative naysayer, it's one person actually gets chosen as the devil's advocate. What could possibly go wrong?
That's how Goldman Sachs Asset Management run their investment committee. That's precisely what they do. For every single investment proposal, they nominate a different devil's advocate. Awesome. That is going to be there to throw rocks at the proposal, in my view, but actually to play devil's advocate, to say, right, well, to challenge the internal rate of return assumptions, to challenge the proposal, so they have a constructive debate on it. Ironically, that was the division that I was working on in Abu Dhabi. We had a whole division of devil's advocates. And
the devil's advocate division.
Weirdly enough, well, they called it something else, but
yes.
Weirdly enough, it didn't make many friends around the organization. So I really do like the idea of moving it around, that you're devil's advocate for his proposal, he's devil's advocate for her proposal, and no, that works. That is a really, really good idea.
It was lots of fun. I hadn't even thought about that, because we get to the point, especially if you're the boss in a 5, 10, 15-person company, it's always if you're paying the bills, people are usually saying, yep, that sounds good.
And there's an inclination for people, even if they don't intend to surround themselves with yes men, because, as you said, we really don't like conflict that much. So if you're surrounding yourself with people who are continually nodding, you're probably making the wrong decision.
That's crazy. So one of my other favorite books is The Compound Effect, and talking about momentum and creating that inertia once things gets moving. How do you, when you're implementing change, how do you try to get that inertia, to get people to keep going? Because change is slow.
It can be. It can be slow and uneventful, or quick and dangerous. I mean, really, take your choice. There's a lot of different options. When it comes to inertia, I actually consider inertia, getting momentum is completely the leader's responsibility, and that's just not taking your eye off the ball. And there are two ways to do that. One is you've got to tap into people's emotions, and we'll talk about that in a second, as I know you want to talk about that area. But inertia can be a huge blocker for change. It can be one of the biggest reasons why change is unsuccessful. And there are three types of what I would call negative inertia. The challenge of moving from talk to action, which is what you were talking about, which is just purely a focus and energy from the leader. And that could just be, it doesn't have to be the leader of a multinational organization. It's whoever is instigating this change, or whoever big or small. You've got to have passion, and you've got to have drive, and you're just not taking your eye off the ball. The second type of inertia that is bad inertia is what I call midterm inertia. And it's when a big change program, or even a small one, any change program, gets ahead of steam. It's a bit like a locomotive running down the track. And it's politically impossible for someone to stand in front of that racing train and say, stop, I'm pretty sure we're heading in the wrong direction. And you know what? Maybe we don't even need a train. And it's really, really difficult to do that. But if you can build a couple of pauses for reflection along the journey to check that the outcomes are still valid, are we still trying to achieve them? Why aren't we achieving them quickly enough? Are we still on track? And then to actually restart the locomotive and get going. That will work really well. And the third type of inertia is fundamentally complacency. And it comes from one of the best business books I read 25 years ago, called The Innovator's Dilemma. It's a brilliant book. The first 6 chapters are simply fabulous, and they simply talk about how the most successful companies in the world have an inbuilt failure mechanism.
So this person's getting up in front of the train, trying to stop it midterm, and how do we tap into those emotions to get people to either jump out in front of the train that's going the wrong direction, or to come along with us?
Well, emotions, they trump logic every time. There's a really good research done by a Portuguese professor called Dalmacio, who had a look at people who had a damage to a particular part of their brain where they could no longer feel emotions anymore. And it was found that a side effect of that is they couldn't actually make decisions as well. They couldn't decide on what they were going to wear, what they're going to eat, because decisions can only be made with emotion. So emotion's got a double-edged sword. It can actually be a barrier to change, but it's also critical to get people on board and to get yourself on board if you want to actually instigate successful change yourself. And the only way to do that is you've got to find your people's emotional triggers. And every single one of us has a different emotional trigger. But the one common question that we all have is, what's in it for me? So if there's going to be a change that you're putting together in a small organization or a big organization, everyone will be thinking, that's all great and fine, but what's in it for me? None of them will express it in that way, but what you'll have to do with every single person that works for you and with you is to help them work out what is in it for them. And frankly, it's that's going to be not just logic, because logic won't cut it. It's got to be an emotional trigger. It's got to appeal to them emotionally. It'll appeal to their pride, their sense of self-worth, their sense of self-esteem, their future status. This is what will actually drag them towards the future that you've spelt out.
Is there some sort of tool that you've found besides just questions that a leader that is not really well versed in this, that doesn't have a big corporate HR budget or things like that, could use to try to figure out what the buttons are, what the emotions are, and psychometrically or something like that?
To be perfectly honest, I don't have one to hand. I've just been introduced to one recently that I'm trying to get my head around. But no, I couldn't give you an answer on that.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. I just didn't. If there was something to hand, that makes it easy. But sometimes it's just asking those questions. But a lot of us don't have that EQ, don't have that emotional.
Yeah, that is true. I should look at that.
And it's a hard thing. So you get that. So we've gone from emotions, and now one of your chapters or one of your headings is values, schmalues. I thought that was great. So walk us through the concept of, if I'm coming in saying these are our company values, and or somebody else's, and they're just looking at us going, values, schmalues, man. I don't care. So.
Well, yeah, but it occurred to me there are really 3 types of values, and because I've been working in so many different organizations where you get values hanging from the wall, and it can be everything from customer centricity to integrity, and people just walk into the building and go, "Hi, yeah," and get into the lift and get back into their cubicle and start work. So a lot of the time, the values that are hanging from the wall or in the annual report bear so little resemblance to actually what's on the ground, and companies are very rarely, or very few companies are actually owning up to that. So I think there are 3 types of values, and I talked to them about them in this chapter. One is fairly obvious. They're your brand values. So what are your brand values? And of course, they're what your customers say that they are. And I think everyone can really, understand that. That's not a problem. But then there's 2 types of corporate values. There's your right corporate values, and that's the corporate values that you put in your annual report and you hang from the wall. But actually, they're your aspirational values. They're not your real corporate values. Your real corporate values are whatever your employees say they are. So if companies could look at values through 3 different lenses of what do your customers say they are, they're your brand values. What do your employees say they are, they're your actual real values. And then what are your right values? What are your aspirational values you're trying to achieve? I think if leaders, if CEOs could could look at values through those lenses, they'd end up with a culture that is genuine. They'd end up with values that are genuine, and we end up with a culture that's aligned to actually deliver the strategy that the values are designed to help. But most of the time, they simply don't. Now, of course, there's the antimatter to this, and of course that is Richard Branson's Virgin. Virgin. When I joined Virgin Wines, I joined Virgin to start Virgin Wines many years ago, and it was a fabulous experience. I was searching around because I was marketing director for Virgin Wines. I was searching around for a Virgin brand manual, and I found it didn't exist, because for the simple reason that if you had to actually state what Virgin's motto, what Virgin stood for, what its values were, and let's say consumer champion would have been a rough version of it, that if you had to state that under the Virgin logo, suddenly just stating that, the very act of stating it, would start to diminish the value, because we'd all be looking for instances where they were the consumer champion. So not only there was not a brand value, there was no other value than that logo. And if you didn't get it, you shouldn't be there.
That's great. Yes, if you have to ask, it's like if you have to ask how much petrol goes in that vehicle of that size, or how much that costs.
Exactly.
The vehicle.
Yeah. Now, not all of us can do that, so I recommend let's go with the 3 types of values and focus on that.
That's awesome. So, and we get into a part of the book, very controversial. You start talking about that each country, or dealing with different countries, you have to deal in different ways when it comes to change. So you put in there that it's, sometimes Americans have to think differently. And me being an American, I just like to know, what do you mean by that? We don't like confrontation.
Well, I learnt this really fun fact, not the hard way, but the real way, the real life way, in that an American company hired me to help them get into the UK market. And so why you'd hire an Australian to get into the UK market? But anyway, I knew the market they were getting into. And it ended up, what neither of us realized, and we both laughed after many months, is what they really hired me to be was a translator between American English and British English. Because as Winston Churchill once said, or once described, America and the UK as separate nations divided by a common language. And it was true. There were certain words that my American clients were using that meant completely different things to the Brits. So I would end up stopping the American CEO midstream and say, no, they didn't mean that. They actually meant this. And while he would scowl at me, he would go, oh, okay. And he'd move off in another direction. We actually saved a lot of time. So your question is, can I translate for you why change is different across cultures?
Yes.
Do you know what? The challenge and the only way to be successful is to try, I have found, and it's difficult, but is to try and put yourself in the shoes of whoever you're dealing with, and empathy is everything. So working in the Middle East to understand how decisions are made, for example, in that culture. And that was fascinating. It's a lot of I wouldn't say committees, but a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion. There's a lot of buy-in before almost any decision is made. And that can have enormous advantages, enormous frustrations too, but enormous advantages that we don't see in the West. And of course, Americans have just a very different gung-ho. Yeah, it'll be great. Let's not look too closely. It'll be fabulous. If we work hard and we think positive, it'll all happen. And Brits, of course, think exactly the opposite way.
Yeah, we'll pay for this tomorrow. That's the way we think for it over here, isn't it? So if the weather's we're definitely going to pay for it tomorrow. Yeah, the change is coming. It's going to be bad. Yeah, so we have some fun over here. And I used to tell people, yeah, I'll call you. I'll call you at 10 tomorrow. And so they wouldn't think it was ring you tomorrow at 10. It was call you. So they're saying, no, we won't be home. We won't even be in. It's like, well, but I'm going to call you on the phone. So if you're not in, I'm sure it'll go to your voicemail. they thought I was actually just going to come around their house and knock the door. And it's like, no, it's not what I meant. So yeah, it's always interesting because you think you come into something that you know you're going to get because it's really easy because you speak English and they speak English, but it's not the same English.
And the one thing I found in foreign countries, I've worked in Japan, I've worked in Asia, I've worked in the Middle East, is that while there are a lot of cultural differences that you really do need to understand and tread carefully around and respect, I think that's the most important thing. It's very quickly trying to focus on a common outcome that you're all trying to achieve, and finding a way to have win-win negotiations or win-win outcomes where everyone wins, not just in delivering the benefits of whatever you're trying to do, but also win in terms of face. So everyone maintains their respect, even as they may change their original attitude or original opinion. And that's the challenge. That requires a lot of time and actually a lot of EQ, but focus on the outcomes and make sure everybody is treated respectfully along the way. There is no other solution, particularly in Asia and the Middle East.
Definitely. No, you don't want to lose face. It's a huge, huge no-no.
Well, none of us really do, but boy, it's heightened in those areas of the world.
So you've written the book, you've won an award. So what are your goals for the rest of this year? I know we're halfway through it already, but what's your goal for this year? What if you were to lay down a couple?
Well, there's quite a few big consulting assignments on the go, which is great. One of my goals for the year was to become a regular faculty member of one of the leading business schools, and I've just wonderfully been asked to join Henley Business School in the UK. So that is fabulous. So I'm a part-time faculty member there. We're working on some very interesting things. I'm also planning to do some work with the Institute of Leadership and Management. That was another goal that I'd set at the start of the year. So that's very exciting. And then I'm starting to pen the second book, to be perfectly honest. So the Change Catalyst is about leading change. It's from the leader's perspective. The next one, which is probably 80% written, is about embracing change from the personal perspective, because all change is personal. So what I talk about in the Change Catalyst is about how to lead change and how to engage with people emotionally. I'm switching that around to say, well, how do we engage ourselves emotionally, and how do we make sure we embrace change rather than sitting there like a victim and feeling that we're powerless? So I'm really enjoying researching and penning that one at the moment.
That's awesome. Now, so I always ask this, so what piece of tech is changing your life right now, whether it's an actual piece of hardware, a piece of software, a vehicle, something like that? What piece of tech is really changing your life?
Okay, there's a piece of tech that it's not directly changing my life, but gosh, it's making my speeches and presentations even more interesting. If I could grin and say that at the same time, and that is it's a customer service avatar called Rachel that is being developed, or a prototype is being developed by a company in New Zealand called Soul Machines on the back of the IBM Watson AI platform. Mm-hmm. And you can Google that and have a look. Just Google Rachel and Soul Machines and IBM Watson, and you'll find a wonderful demo of how this customer service avatar, who looks and talks exactly like a human, and using the voice recognition, using the camera, and using the microphone, is trying to learn how to understand emotions, understand visual cues, and become more emotionally intelligent, not just an algorithm, or make an emotionally intelligent algorithm. And she can deliver, when she works really, really well, she can deliver the best customer experience of a company's best customer service operator, but she can deliver it to 1,000 people at the same time and deliver the same level of high quality experience every single time. Now, she's just a prototype at the moment, but I think we used to outsource customer service centres to either Scotland or India. If you're in the UK, I think we're going to outsource them to the cloud within tens and twenties of months rather than tens and twenties of years. It's really exciting.
That's awesome. That's really good. And so, what book do you have for pleasure and for business right now? One or the other, or if it's the same book, then that'd be great.
Right. A book for business that I've always liked is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's a quick read, and fundamentally I based 2 of the chapters in my book on that. Or is it 1? But anyway, I think it's about 2 of the chapters on that. And that's well and truly worthwhile. It's very easy to read, and it's just the best, to me, it's the best book on strategy that I've seen. And to be perfectly honest, all I'm reading is on a personal level is all the different books that were shortlisted on the at the book awards. So I'm currently going through the Leader's Guide to Presenting, and another one called Leadership in Focus by a good mate of mine, Vern Oakley. So I don't have any personal novels at the moment. I'm reading more business books than I'd care to name.
That's great. And how can it'll be in the show notes, but how can people learn more about you and what you do?
Sure. My website is changeandstrategy.com. So all the W is changeandstrategy.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Campbell Macpherson. Follow me on Twitter, which is at Campbell TCC for the Change Catalyst. So, and I'd be delighted to converse with anyone that wants to give me some tips on exactly what I should have included in the book. And actually, there is not a typo, but I've used the wrong name somewhere in the book. So if anyone wants to get back to me and tell me what that is, as one of my very early readers did, that would be a good challenge.
Very cool. So there's a challenge for the listeners. And then the last thing is one valuable quick-fire top tip for the listeners, so that if they get to this and they've fallen asleep for half of it because they did whatever, because they've been up all night working, they wake up at this point in time. This is the and that's how you make £1 million sort of question. So what top tip do we have that people could just write down at the end of this and say, that will help me today?
Easy as one word, and it's listen. Whenever you try to instigate change, don't tell people what to do. Ask them how they should be doing it. And actually, I think that's the best tip to make $1 million or even just to get anything off the ground. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Campbell Macpherson and The Change Catalyst. And thanks for coming on the show. So hopefully everybody got a lot of good tips out of this. There'll be stuff in the show notes. But thank you very much, and we will talk to you again soon, Campbell.
Fabulous. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us on Grow, Sell, and Retire. For more information, tools, or to book one of our team members to work with your team, business, or to speak at your event or conference, visit bartdaltonconsulting.com or email contact@bartdaltonconsulting.com. Buy the book True Gravity on Amazon. If you want to work for the rest of your life, that is your business. If you don't, that is ours.